Today, we're going to unlock the secrets hidden inside some of humanity's most precious objects, ancient manuscripts. And believe me, we're going way deeper than just the words on the page. Think about this for a second. What if a book could tell you its own story? What if every little crack in its binding, every pinprick on its pages, every stain on the parchment was actually a clue? A clue to a much bigger mystery. Because that's what these things are. They're not just books. They're time capsules. Each one is a physical artifact, a survivor of history that carries the DNA of its creators and, the fingerprints of every single person who ever held it. To really understand them, we have to start treating them less like simple literature and a lot more like a forensic investigation. Now, our main subject is something called the Codex, which is basically the ancestor of the modern book. And our crime scene, well, it's this massive historical and geographical region all connected by the Mediterranean, which is where the Codex was born and really took off. For centuries, scholars pretty much studied these artifacts in isolation, one culture at a time. The problem was they were totally missing the big picture, all these hidden connections. It was clear a new kind of task force was needed. And that's exactly what happened. The Comparative Oriental Manuscript Studies Project, or COMST for short, was formed. It was this global team of experts who all realized that to really crack the code of these manuscripts, they had to work together, comparing notes across dozens of different cultures and languages. So let's get one thing straight. When these scholars use the word Oriental, they're not using some old-fashioned, vague stereotype. It's a very specific term for all the non-Latin manuscript traditions that have a direct historical link to the Mediterranean. We're talking about an absolutely vast, interconnected world of knowledge stretching all the way from Ethiopia to Armenia, from Egypt to Georgia. And this is where things get really cool. This is where the breakthroughs started happening. By comparing, say, a Coptic book from Egypt with a Syriac one from ancient Mesopotamia, scholars started seeing things that were completely invisible before. They saw patterns, shared techniques in bookbinding, similar ways of ruling pages. And suddenly, these weren't just separate, isolated traditions anymore. They were all part of this huge, interconnected web of shared knowledge. So how in the world do they interrogate these ancient objects? Well, let's open up the Manuscript Detectives Toolkit and find out. Okay, so this toolkit has 4 essential layers. First up is catagology, which is all about the book's physical body, its materials, how it was put together. Next is paleography, where we zero in on the writer's hand. Then you've got textual criticism, which traces the wild journey of the text itself. And finally, conservation, which is all about the object's life and how we can preserve it for the future. All right, the very first step is to treat the manuscript just like a body at a crime scene. You have to analyze its physical structure, its very DNA. This brings us to the first tool in our kit, codicology. Just think of it as the archaeology of the book. Experts in this field look at everything. What's it made of? Papyrus, parchment, paper? How are the pages folded and sewn together? Even the layout of the text on the page. All these little details are clues that can help us pinpoint exactly when, where, and how a manuscript was made. It's amazing. So once you've examined the body, it's time to figure out who left their mark. And for that, you need to look at the handwriting. And this brings us to paleography, which is the study of ancient scripts. By analyzing the subtle shapes and strokes of the letters, a real expert can often date a manuscript with incredible accuracy. Sometimes they can even identify the individual scribe who wrote it. It's basically historical graphology. Now we get to the story itself. But here's the thing you have to remember. In an age where everything was copied by hand, no 2 witnesses ever tell the exact same story. So the discipline for sorting out all these different accounts is called textual criticism. I mean, scribes were human, right? They got tired, they made typos, and sometimes they'd correct things they didn't quite understand. So by comparing all the known copies of a text, scholars can build this kind of family tree, tracing the errors and changes back through generations of copies to get as close as they possibly can to the original text. And here's a perfect example of how this whole comparative approach works in the real world. Just look at how scribes prepared their pages. In the Greek tradition, a lot of the time they'd prick these tiny holes down the margin of the page to guide their ruling for each line. But in many Hebrew traditions, they use this super clever device called a ruling board to impress faint guidelines onto a whole stack of pages all at once.
Two totally different solutions to the same problem, and each one reveals these unique cultural fingerprints. At the end of the day, all of this incredibly detailed detective work serves one absolutely crucial mission: preservation. But why? Why go to all this trouble for a bunch of dusty old books? Well, because these aren't just artifacts. They are an endangered species. Every single one of these manuscripts is under constant threat. You've got the slow, unavoidable decay of natural aging, ink that fades, parchment that gets brittle. Then there are environmental threats like humidity and mold, and biological ones like insects and rodents. And we haven't even mentioned the human element yet. Everything from simple wear and tear to censorship and even deliberate destruction during wars. Every single one that's lost is a piece of our collective memory gone forever. But here's the good news. The same kind of technology that's defining our future is also helping us save our past. High-resolution digital scans are creating basically immortal copies. Multispectral imaging can actually read text that was erased centuries ago. And these incredible global databases allow a scholar in Germany to instantly compare notes on a manuscript sitting in a monastery in Ethiopia, making connections that were totally impossible just a generation ago. And that really is the crucial point here. This isn't just some academic exercise for dusty libraries. It is a rescue mission. It's about making sure that the stories, the science, the art, and the history encoded in these incredibly fragile objects survive for all of us. The scholars who put together the handbook that inspired this whole explainer, they ended their introduction with this beautiful Latin phrase, a quiet little invitation from the past. It means, reader, pay attention. You will be delighted. And I think that's the real secret of these manuscripts. If we just take the time to really look closely, they have the most incredible stories to tell.